Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming to listen to me speak. As I reflect on my troubled country, the lyrics of a Bruce Springsteen song come to mind. We are far, far away from home. Our home is very far away from us. And that's how it feels to live in Mexico today during these turbulent times. Far from democratic normalcy, far from the rule of law, far from home and close to everything that imperils it. Always on the lookout, always suspicious, anxious, invaded by the legitimate fear of walking on the street after dark, taking money out of an ATM, hopping into a cab, being stopped by a corrupt policeman, receiving the call of a kidnapper saying that he has taken your child, burying a son, losing a daughter. My home has been a place where too many people die, gunned down by a drug trafficker, or assaulted by a robber, or shot by an ill-trained police officer, or kidnapped and strangled by a member of a criminal gang, as was the case with the teenage children of prominent businessmen Alejandro Martí and Nelson Vargas. In a country where over 7,000 people have died in drug-related violence over the last year, insecurity is top of mind for most Mexicans. And given the increasingly lawless conditions of the country he inherited, President Felipe Calderón had little choice but to act. The former ruling party that governed Mexico over 71 years in an authoritarian fashion left behind a toxic legacy. During the 1980s, drug trafficking blossomed throughout the country as a result of political protection. Drug traffickers infiltrated the Mexican government, frequently aided and abetted by members of the federal judicial police, as well as by state-level officials. The political structure built by the PRI provided a shell for organized crime that was able to swell not despite the government, but thanks to the blind eye it frequently turned. And dealing with a problem that has become more widespread and embedded than President Calderón had originally envisioned has not been easy, because the surge of drug trafficking in Mexico reflects a painful paradox. The government's drug enforcement efforts are undermined by the corrupting influence of the drug trade, yet the drug trade cannot survive without the protection of compromised elements in the government. Cocaine traffickers spend as much as $500 million a year on bribery, which is double the budget of the Mexican Attorney General's office. As a result, it frequently becomes difficult to distinguish those charged with smuggling from the smugglers themselves. Policemen regularly play dual roles. They act as drug enforcers and as drug smuggling protectors. In places like Tijuana and Chihuahua, the army has effectively been brought in to protect the population from the police. Mexico is a place where, if you are the victim of a crime, the last person you call is a police officer. In the face of police corruption, Felipe Calderón has turned to the military to take on the anti-drug effort. But bringing soldiers out of the barracks and moving them around the country at will is a cause for concern. As a result of its expanded role, the military is becoming the supreme authority, and in some cases, the only authority in parts of some states. And greater militarization is leading to greater corruption within an institution that has turned into the last credible beachhead in Mexico's long-standing battle. So using the military as a roving cleanup force may solve some short-term problems, but may also create some larger, intractable ones. In order to be more effective, Felipe Calderón and the Mexican government in general has to deal with Mexico's culture of illegality. Over the past decade, the surge of drug trafficking and Calderón's efforts to contain its effects are symptomatic of what doesn't work in Mexico's dysfunctional democracy. As George Orwell wrote, people denounce wars while preserving the type of society that makes them inevitable. Mexico has a political, economic, and political structure that makes crime possible. It is a country characterized by politicians who protect drug traffickers and drug traffickers who finance politicians, by those who launder money, and unregulated financial institutions that allow the practice to occur, by judges who become accomplices of criminals and criminals who can and do bribe them. And although Felipe Calderón has declared that he is winning the war against the drug mafias, the truth is that government institutions frequently shelter their members. Drug trafficking in Mexico is nurtured by extensive corruption and persistent impunity. It feeds upon a country where 85% of crimes are never reported due to lack of trust in the authorities, and where 98% of crimes are never resolved or punished. So while the president's efforts are to be at some level applauded, the prospect for a less insecure, more stable Mexico will be contingent on the government's capacity to effect a major overhaul of the judiciary and law enforcement apparatus. It will be dependent on the government's political will to confront corruption at the highest levels, something Calderón has been very reluctant to do. In other words, the president needs to fight not only drug traffickers, but also the political networks that protect them. Otherwise, Mexico will continue to combat symptoms while ignoring their causes. Now, Calderón has told the U.S. that the heightened level of violence is a result of government efficacy in combating drug cartels, that the rise in executions is sign of a firm hand and not an ineffectual one. But Calderón's stance, the stance that he is winning the war, is one that he is forced to maintain for domestic political imperatives given the forthcoming election. That stance sidesteps the problems that cannot be dealt with more weapons, more bullets, more members of the military policing key cities, more blood on the streets, more simplistic solutions to complex problems. The current strategy, based on the increased militarization of Mexico, ignores high-level corruption that no one really wants to combat. It ignores a police force so weak, so ill-trained, so underpaid, and so infiltrated that good apples are spoiled by rotten ones. It ignores that an enhanced military presence is resulting in increased human rights abuses in a country where too many of them already occur. It ignores a concentrated, oligopolistic economic structure that thwarts growth and social mobility, forcing people across the border or into the drug trade in record numbers. 450,000 Mexicans are involved in the cultivation, processing, and distribution of drugs, according to a recent estimate. The current strategy also ignores the existence of a permanent subclass of over 20 million people who live on less than $2 a day and who view drug cultivation as a way out of, the only way out of, extreme poverty. Drug traffickers in Mexico are becoming more powerful due to historic, recalcitrant patterns that recent governments have failed to confront. If Mexico cannot deal with its domestic corruption, it won't matter how many troops are trained, how many weapons are shipped, and how many helicopters are bought. Colombia has spent over $5 billion in U.S.